Welcome, students, to Monk Meditation, the show about monks in the world of Warcraft.
There's not much in the way of news this week, so we're going to take on the final boss, Archimonde, and also talk about role design. So should healers DPS? Coming up on Monk Meditation, episode 57.
Here's your host, Chai T.
Hello everyone, welcome back to Monk Meditation, the best show about the best class out there. Well, I can't say the best show because Minecraft's pretty damn good, but it's a show anyways. And we're back with two of our regular co-hosts. Air is in the process of moving, so will not be joining us this week, but should be back for the next episode that isn't about Mistweaver. So we'll get back to that, but let's check in with tonight's host on how WoW is now in
Storm, Earth,
and fire!
All right, starting off with Monkio. How you doing, sir?
Doing good. We got a new microphone, so hopefully it sounds a little bit clearer, a little bit crisper. Courtesy of the show, of course.
Yeah, thank you, Patreons.
Thank you very much. You know, just over the past week, I've been trying to figure out what all specs I want my alts to be, because they're just kind of sitting there, so I want to have them spec'd, I guess, and ready to go for Legion, because it's probably the next time they'll see any combat or anything. And I got to see a preview of my Noxychew BlizzCon badge, and it looked really good. And I can't wait, just a preview. I can't wait to see the finished product.
Full
Should
thing,
be really good.
Yeah, I really wanted to get in on those badges, but then I found out I probably wasn't going to BlizzCon, so I was like, yeah, I can't do it. Next year. All right, and going to LeBlue, who is currently finishing a dungeon because way too much time I already spent on that.
It would never be doing a dungeon while trying to finish up something really quickly at all.
No.
My week's actually been all right. I finally found a guild. I found a group. I'm now back on Storm Rage with the guild Anti-Meridium.
I need to change your lower third here really quick then.
What?
I need to change your because it says Airy Peak. Keep talking.
Oh, well, fine. But yeah, I'm with Anti-Meridium. Last week they got Mythic Council, and then this week we got Mythic Kilrog, even though it took a little bit longer than it should have. But we'll get through. Gorfiend progression starts this week. I can't say I'm exactly looking forward to that slog, but at least it's progression, right?
And it's Mythic, so there you are.
Yeah, so I'm excited about that.
For those video listeners, you may see LeBlue's new pose up on his... well, there's that too. I was talking about the panda on the left-hand side instead of the Draenei. We'll get to that later. That's called a tease, people. All right, and I am running Corrin Dire Brew multiple times every day for a chance to not get the Kodo and get more tokens that I already have all the stuff for. Other than that, mainly just in for raiding. So Rolling Thunder is getting our butts kicked by Heroic Sakrathar right now. That is a tricky fight. Our Brewmaster tank learned that in the in the robot, he used to be able in normal to charge and hit all the ghosts, even though if they were like shackled and stuff, and like put more fire on them. He learned he can't do that in Heroic because all of a sudden robot goes from 100% to 0. So we're spending a lot of our time going back and doing farm content, getting a few more 4 pieces, and we seem to be having healer issues. We just lost another healer, but we now have another healer trial, so yay.
And it's like once I left, suddenly you can't hang on to a priest.
Yeah, we can't hold on to priests. We do have one priest, Shadow Priest, that's staying still. We can't hold on to healing priests, apparently. So,
yeah, I wish I could help.
Yeah. Let's see. And the Archimonde nerf went in just before our run this Friday. So we had no Rock Chaos, no Living Shadows, and yet we still wiped more than we did the previous week with that stuff. So I don't know.
Because reasons.
Wait, with the nerfs, they took out those mechanics?
Yeah, so if you didn't see that, in normal, they're trying to make the jump from normal to heroic similar to the jump from heroic to mythic.
Right.
So they add in mechanics. So Rot Chaos and Living Shadows don't exist on normal anymore.
So what does he do?
He just does the chains in phase...
Looks at you really mean and goes, "Grr, I'm going to hit you."
So yeah, you have the chains in phase 2, and then you still have the Infernals and the Nether Banish. You still have the Banish in phase 3. But you don't have the living shadows, which is good because that's a pain in the butt mechanic. It's not hard; it's just a pain. So, but it's something that you get to add in heroic that makes it more difficult, which is I'm okay with that in the most part. But it's like it was really nice going from normal. You do normal and you go into heroic, and they're like, "All right, what changed? Nothing. It just hits harder. You know the fight. Let's go." So it was kind of nice, but
I suppose.
Yeah. It's kind of nice learning new mechanics as we go along, I guess. So it'll be interesting. I think that's going to be the motive going forward. So, and LeBlue's eating with his mic open.
Probably, yeah.
All right. Well, it's time to get caught up in the crazy whirlwind of WoW news in
Dizzying Haze.
I'm just going to stop the Dizzying Haze intro because there's not much here. Warcraft movie trailer. I almost killed LeBlue here. Warcraft movie trailer officially announced to be shown at BlizzCon. So those of you that are going to BlizzCon, you're going to have a special treat up in that Dolby Theater with all this crazy speakers and everything like that. So last year you saw the teaser trailer. Now you're going to see the trailer.
If you haven't seen the leaked version from, like, I don't know, where was it, like Russia or whatever it was, the crazy camera where the guy was disappointed.
Right, yeah, the guy like, oh, that was no good. That sucked, man.
That was wonderful to listen to.
Yeah.
It's like, why thank you for judging this for me. I was going to make my own opinion, but since you formulated one for me, whether I agree with it or not, I don't even need to anymore. Thank you. Good job, Blizzard. You even made leaks casual. Jerks.
Yeah, so I'm kind of disappointed I won't be at BlizzCon this year because I think that would have been really cool to see. So hopefully it actually comes out to the general public shortly thereafter.
I wish I was going. Total Biscuit's going to be there, and I would so fanboy. Oh well, yeah. Next year maybe.
So that's about it for news. As we get closer to BlizzCon, maybe stuff will start leaking out a little bit, but I doubt it. No. So we've got 2 more episodes before BlizzCon, so they'll be short ones. Now it's time to impart some tips and tricks for those raiding monks in
Fist of Fury.
Yeah!
It's go time.
All right, so we're taking on Archimonde now, and before we would just give general tips and tricks for the entire encounter right up. We'd split it up, Mistweaver, Windwalker, Brewmaster. This is a long fight and a complicated fight. It's got 6 phases. So what we're going to do is kind of go over the different phases and talk about specific encounters. And if there's a monk tip, we can get specific mechanics in the encounter. And then if there's tips we can give about that are monk specific, we'll talk about that. So let's get right into it. Phase 1 and Phase 2. Doomfire, Fixate. Pretty sure it's just move away. Yeah. So
yes,
that,
like, move it away.
Do monks get that?
Now.
Yes.
Do you? I'm a tank. I've never gotten it before.
Yeah,
so I don't
melee
know.
can get it. Mistweavers can get it. It doesn't happen that often, but it can happen. If you set your you can. The only thing I can say is if you get it, hit Transcendence before you start moving and book it, and come right back.
I must be really lucky because I've never got it.
Yeah.
Like, on my monk.
Yeah, maybe I'm just thinking because we did the all monk raid, and so everybody gets
that
it.
Might be it. You might be triggering right now.
That's true. I'm probably having a little bit of PTSD right now. Yeah. Okay, Lure of Flames. So this one everybody gets. So Tiger's Lust, I choose this for this encounter because it's really nice to get away and boost off if you don't have a whole bunch of druids roaring you. You can also, I think, Monkio added this one. Oh no.
Yeah, if you're only doing 2 spots, like move from here to here, you can go back and forth. Transcendence is pretty good.
Ping pong it, man.
Tiger's Lust is a good ability. I take it on that fight because this is pretty much just for Mythic because you have to pick up the fire and soak it before Lure is cast. And it allows our prot warrior, who doesn't have any other kind of sprints or anything, to pick up his fire a little bit faster. But what's that talent? That reduces the roll cooldown. Not momentum.
Yeah, that is momentum.
Oh, is it? No, it's not momentum. Celerity.
Oh, okay.
Can be pretty good because you actually get both 2 of your roll charges back per phase, like going back and forth. So it depends on whatever you want, but I think Tiger's Lust is definitely
Tiger's Lust is
a better call there.
Yeah, Transcendence is good. It just depends on how far away you pull them, because I think our team does more than the 30 yards. So
just doing Transcendence the chains off. Well, I guess that's not a damn. I can't compare the 2 fights. I'm so used to Mythic. I forget.
All right, Shadowfell Burst. So this one we shouldn't be targeted at all, but Mistweavers and Windwalkers are both very good for helping soak. So you have Zen Meditation as a Windwalker, so you can get in there, like you can soak 3 or 4 people dropping down. That hopefully shouldn't happen if your ranger is paying attention.
It won't.
But Mistweaver and Windwalker, and I guess Brewmaster too, but that probably won't happen, can soak with Diffuse Magic.
In case of all monk raid.
Yes. Yeah. So, and then someone else had something?
Yeah, it's the same thing. If you're in melee, which, I mean, you're monk, you're in melee, and you have to go out, like, way out to soak a Shadowfell Burst, you can just Transcendence back in. Just drop it before you leave. Pretty good.
Yeah. I hear a theme. Transcendence.
Yeah.
It's
like Windwalker. When I was at Windwalker in the fight, like, I just Flying Serpent kicked back in, but I was with Mistweaver. You know, I usually don't go too far to the point where I need Transcendence because I'm just a roll away. But it's there if you need it, you know. Right. If you have the targets list out to one way out there, cause some guy would just...
Because it's not like you can Zen Med to save yourself if something goes wrong.
That is true. I'm triggered. Want that back.
Let's talk about Deathbrand, a Brewmaster specific thing here. Go for it.
Yeah, this is the tank debuff, and does a very solid chunk of damage when it hits you, and then it ramps up as time goes on. So this is for Mistweavers. This is when you scream for them to put their happy bubble on you. That's slightly bigger than the power word shield. But when you're doing this, make sure you have guard ready, and Diffuse Magic comes into play as a wonderful cooldown for helping reduce some of that damage. Excuse me, I'm choking on dinner. I see a DPS thing here while I hack and die real quick.
Yes. Be sure to use your Storm
choke on a power word shield, huh? How about that? You gonna make fun of my life, Cocoon?
So yeah, be sure to use the Storm, Earth, and Fire on these Hellcallers. They're not a huge priority, so cleave damage is fine. So let's go on to Shadow Blast.
Monkey's not allowed to use Touch of Karma on me anymore. That's a dick move.
I don't have Touch of Karma. I don't have anything.
You went in your off spec. We saw what you did.
That's true. Yeah. It's really good on that fight, by the way. It's really fun to play. Shadow Blast, you know, it's just the thing that happens. You know, it lands in the tank, and I don't even if the timings line up where a tank gets Shadow Blast and has the Deathbrand on them. Can that even happen? I think it can. But
the shadow, what do you mean? The Shadow Blast.
The Shadow Blast, the debuff that it puts on you. Does it put a debuff on you, heroic? I don't even know.
The mob. So he puts Deathbrand on you, which makes the mob target you, and then the mob puts the Shadow Blast on you.
Okay, so it does it at the same time. I mean, that's you know, in a tank, it's just something you have to deal with, and that's part of the reason the damage is so high. But if it goes on another player and interacts with the next mechanic, you know, in a way that
why don't you go ahead, Mr. Spoiler Pants?
Alrighty then. So the next one is Desecrate, which also interacts with the following mechanic after it. Desecrate, just a bunch of AoE damage on the raid. And anyone who's affected by Shadow Blast is going to take more damage from it. I think it's like 25% or something like that. Mm-hmm. But all this can be mitigated by Light of the Naru, which is you get from picking up the giant white orbs that fly around the ground after a Desecrate pillar breaks, I guess. I think it breaks, whoever breaks it. Yeah. For whatever reason they break it. And if you don't have a Light of the Naru buff, and you do have Shadow Blast debuff, and Desecrate is going on, that player is going to take some major damage, so just extra heals on them, or a small cooldown, like a Life Cocoon, or a Power Word Shield is probably better anyway. So just watch out for those three things. It's not often, and it's not a huge deal typically, but it can happen.
Yep. All right, let's move on to phase 3 and 4. Shackled Torment. So again, Transcendence. Make sure you hit your Transcendence and then get out, roll out, and then pop right back in. Also, an excellent use of Touch of Karma for Windwalkers. And Revival is a really good stabilizer after the first 2 breaks if people are dipping low. So you don't want that third person to just be chilling out with it. So Revival will pop it right back in. All right, and anything else?
Just, you know, talent. Like Russian Jade Wind is excellent for this fight for this mechanic. Like, there's no reason to take anything else. It's just so good because everybody's stacked. It should be stacked. Everybody's still, and it's awesome.
Can I get the next mechanic? I got dibs on Rock Chaos. It says just try to be out of the group. I've deemed that boring and unfun. You actually want to try to hit as many members as you can so that your Mistweavers have something to do. And I give really good advice, and you should listen to me.
Yep, always listen to LeBlue. All right, let's go on to the ads that come out. Dreadstalkers and Overfiends. The Dreadstalkers, pretty simple. Don't stand in circles. They'll silence you, and that sucks. So don't do that. If you're a Windwalker, cleave these down. This is your ham portion of the fight. Just go ham as a Windwalker. Focus on the Overfiends so that you can help interrupt. Put your clones up in the Dreadstalkers. Chi Explosion, your heart's content. Rushing Jadewind if you took that. And just have a lot of fun here. Watch the numbers roll on in.
Yeah. Cool. Cleave. Yeah. DPS trinkets. Yep.
Interrupt.
Yes. Make sure you interrupt the flames of Argus. Yeah. And Mistweavers can do that too, as you pointed out, Mokio.
Woo!
All right. What about for Brewmasters here?
So while the Dreadstalkers kind of run around and do whatever the heck they want because reasons, the friendly Flames of Argosy guy, the Overfiend, he's actually a tankable mob that you need to pick up. And as always, if there's ads that need picked up, you should probably drop Dave where you need him. Obviously, Archimonde's moving back and forth between points for ping pong with the Allure of Flames. So you're going to have to pretty consistently redrop him every time you move just to make sure you pick him up. Obviously not required, but it helps, especially when you have a really large Eridar in like your entire screen. Kind of annoying.
Right.
And I would, as much as I would love to watch some raiders just get punched in the face by a fiery miniature Balrog, kind of a bad thing for progression. So.
All right, let's move on to phase 5 and 6, the final phases. This is the oh god, we're all gonna die phase. So Nether Banish, the Shadowed Nether Walkers. So if you get banished and go down to the banished group, and monks are actually pretty darn good down here. Touch of Shadows is, of course, just an interrupt thing. Don't let that go off. And if you get pursued by the Void Star and you have Dark Pursuit on you, we're one of the best because we can avoid it for a long time with clever usage of Tiger's Lust, Roll, Transcendence. There's just all these ways to do it. And
listen, like I'm gonna blow this wide open here. You can let it hit you away from everyone and instantly Transcendence back. The only reason I know this is because I'll be part of the sacrifice group when we're about to kill out on Heroic, and I will literally live through a Void Star chasing me because I'll run over, let it hit me, and then I'll port back instantly. So you can get hit and Transcendence. It'd be quick, but you can do it. So you don't need to sit there and do NASCAR and do the Indy 500 in there trying to dodge that thing.
That's really fun to do, too.
This is the blue tested, not Monkio approved.
Right.
So just
I've tried that before and failed. So.
I have actually done it. That said, if you have any
it's perfectly fine.
If you have some latency, however, or if you're just a little slow on the draw, you're probably going to go.
So you go 30 yards real fast.
Yes, you do. But if you're quick and you believe in the heart of the cards, you can do it.
Yep.
Also,
if you decide to kite it, it'd be a good idea to try and kite it in a way that your melee can hit it and slow it. I'm pretty sure it's slowable.
Yes, it is. I throw beer on it.
Don't run it away from your melee. Try to get it to them, but without getting hit. Just general kiting rules.
Yep. And then another storm, circle on the ground. Don't stand in it. Pretty obvious.
That was. I saw it. I was reading it. I was like, "What is that?"
What is another storm?
I use it for expel harm, so I can do damage with that because it hits harder than jab. But don't mind me. I'm a terrible scumbag, and you shouldn't listen to me.
So upstairs, when you get ported down, another tear pops up, and living shadows will come out of that periodically. If it hits you, it will do Devour Life, which really sucks for Mistweavers because that means we can't heal you very effectively. So who wants to take this one?
Yes, I gotta do it. The shadows can actually be stunned, so if one is chasing you or you see it heading to someone else and it's not being slowed or killed at all, you can throw a stun on it. It helps. Usually somebody will kill it, but sometimes they don't. You can't really do anything about that. You're pretty spread in this phase, so it's pretty easy to see who they're going to. Ideally, hunters will have traps down, so this isn't an issue, but just be prepared for it. And Windwalkers, if you see one heading through you, which I don't know why it's heading through you, but you can slow it down with what's called Disable.
Yeah.
So just keep that in mind. Be aware.
All right. Notes for Rolling Thunder. Hunters put ice trap. Okay, got it. All right. Demonic feedbacks. Just stay within 6 yards, or stay outside of 6 yards of everybody. You have a DBM rangefinder, hopefully, so not that hard. And I'm guessing that's spam in the chat room, so time out you. Bye-bye. And Reign of Chaos. Infernals. These are fun.
Fun.
Yes.
Yeah. This is the everybody panics and somebody wipes their A because they didn't do things right and whatever.
Yeah.
Was there still chains? There's still chains in this phase, right?
Yes,
no,
chains still pop up.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's a dangerous. So, like,
Rock
you have to make
Chaos
that a choice, between breaking the chains and not breaking the chains. If you have chains before Reign of Chaos, because these mechanics are very important because they hit nearly the same time. Like, it's very important if you have the time to break the chains before the Reign of Chaos, because Reign of Chaos damage tends to ramp up as the Infernals fall. You don't want to be breaking chains mid-Reign of Chaos, and you certainly don't want to have chains counting down like into the 20-second range during Reign of Chaos, because that person is going to die and their chain is going to explode when they die. But for the Reign of Chaos itself, this is a great time for revivals and any other healer cooldowns. And
he starts doing this at what, like 20%, 15, 20%? It starts all hell breaking loose. Like, I mean, it's a pretty cool, like, hectic, oh my gosh, the world's ending kind of phase, because you just have Infernals dropping all over the place.
Yeah, you're just, like, constantly running around screaming, oh my god, I'm gonna die.
Yeah, don't stand in green circles, kids. They're bad for you.
So,
can be CC'd.
Yes, with the Infernals, don't forget you can use Paralyze. Just make sure you don't paralyze the first one that drops down that everyone's supposed to be targeting, because then all of a sudden they get very confused. That one starts hellfiring, everyone dies. I may or may not have done that last week. Probably not. No, I definitely wouldn't have done that. And don't forget that you have Provoke as Windwalker and Mistweaver. So if the CCs get broken and they're getting close enough to start healing each other, taunt one and just book it. So you can help out with that. And if Hellfire goes off, just kiss your butt goodbye. I think that's pretty much.
Don't taunt the boss.
It's not actually melee that hard though. Yeah, they're actually pretty wussy so far as their melee slings.
Yeah, it's not that bad. Still, you probably don't want to get hit by that, especially if chains are going off and stuff like that. So
that's fair, I suppose.
Yeah.
Touch of Karma. There you go.
Touch of Karma. There you go. Touch of Karma. Use your defensive cooldowns on that one. Don't forget you have Diffuse Magic, Zen Meditation, Dampen Harm.
Unless you're Mistweaver, then you don't have Zen Meditation.
Shut up. I always forget that Fortifying Brew. I always forget the name of that. I see the picture clearly in my head. I know which button to hit for it. Can't remember the name.
It's your baby shield wall.
Yeah. Okay. Anybody else for anything else on this fight? Because we are done with Archimonde.
EUN. Touch of Death, everything. If it even looks like maybe Touch of Death it. You know why? Because meters. And meters are how you get rankings. Rankings are how you just get them.
Feel good about yourself.
Yes. That's how you feel
don't
good about
forget
yourself.
Touch of Death, because that heals a crap ton too. So.
And if I find a Mistweaver touch of deathing my mom, I'm trying to touch a death, there will be blood.
Sorry, bud. It could be faster.
All right, students, it's time to meditate and expand our knowledge in
Transcendence.
And we have the spammers out in force tonight. Look at this.
I had several this morning when I was streaming, so
awesome.
I'm ready.
All right, so it seems like every show we stumble across a tidbit of information brings us a little closer to fuller understanding of the monk class until Legion drops anyway. So here are the things we learned this week.
So I wrote this down. It just says that from what I've seen from this trial we picked up recently, Windwalkers do a lot of damage. So it's kind of hard to hear all the, like, Windwalkers are terrible, Windwalkers suck, and they don't do any damage when I see this Windwalker that we picked up doing like top 5 in like every single fight, and you could say that the other players in the guild maybe aren't that great at their classes, but I don't believe that one bit. This guy is just really good at his spec, and it's
it is post-buff.
Yeah, but still, I mean, people are still saying that they don't like playing the spec, and they think it's still not worth it, not worth bringing, it's still benchable. It's like, no, this is a really good spec. It was fine before, and now it's really good. It's really incredible.
Yeah, if you have a good player, they're really good. I mean, you start throwing in that 4-piece and the class trinket, and they interact so well together. And if you have someone that's really good at hitting their buttons in the right order, stuff's going to die.
It's really a lot of chi explosion too. Like, just getting the most out of chi explosion is really important.
Right. All right, well, today we're going to talk about role design. This came up on Twitter today. I noticed there was a huge debate going on between...
they've been breaking out all over the place.
Yeah.
Like every day I see someone somewhere debating stuff, and then mud gets flung, and I get popcorn.
And I totally thought this would be a really good discussion, especially because Mistweavers and Brewmasters focus so heavily in on these discussions. So let's talk about this. So what's our first topic, Monkey?
I suppose I'll start with tanks because it kind of flows down from there. So basically, the discussion we had on Twitter was whether or not, it started with healers, but then I started to branch it out into other topics as well, was should the roles, the tank, healer, DPS roles, be more narrow, more concentrated into their defined roles? Should tanks be more focused on reducing the amount of damage they take and maybe recovering from that damage, DPS on DPS and healers on healing, rather than having DPS who can pop, raid defensive cooldowns or heal themselves up, or have huge personal cooldowns that reduce any need for healing? Tanks have hardly any what's the word I'm looking for, control over the defensive cooldowns they receive. It's mostly in the hands of healers, and that makes healers, with those cooldowns really powerful. Maybe do healers do too little damage, too much damage? Those are the kind of things I wanted to talk about. So specifically starting with tanks, a lot of things I hear from listening to tanks talk is that they feel like they don't have enough control over how much damage they're taking. They have 2 cooldowns maybe, and maybe they're good for, those 2 mechanics. But you look at the amount of cooldowns you have from healers, you've got a paladin or 2, and that's 4 different sacks, hand of sacks. You've got a discipline priest at least for pain suppression, and some other healer has great cooldowns. It's a druid with iron bulk and a 1-minute cooldown. You can use Spirit Link defensively.
Yeah, that's the only healer that's really lacking is a shaman. Shaman's the only healer really lacking a tank cooldown.
And life kicking can be good, but it's like you have so many. Even Power Word Shield can be considered a mini cooldown. Consider how often you can spam it.
You still got DPS with defensive cooldowns too. Vigilance.
Yeah, exactly.
And
it's just like, oh yeah, vigilance. Like that's so huge. Like it's just like it doesn't make a lot of sense for so many cooldowns to be out of the tank's hand. Your survivability is so dependent on other players.
So if I can kind of interject as a tank, so I guess part of the big thing is a lot of and this has sort of been growing since Mist of Pandaria, when vengeance was a big thing and damage was a thing, and damage was often used as how good a tank are you, how much damage can you take, not die, because that translates directly to damage, which helps your group. So that damage became a new kind of meter that wasn't as big a deal. Cataclysm, Wrath, and I'm sure before that I didn't play before that because it was negligible for the most part.
Yeah, definitely.
To some extent in Wrath, threat was a thing in Wrath. Threat died, and for all intents and purposes, threat kind of died out. So what happens is with this expansion in particular, with the nerfing of active mitigation and tanks' personal defensive tools, tanks became more reliant on healers. Tanks were effectively immortal gods played well at the end of Mist of Pandaria. Problem, obviously, because you've now broken the Trinity and saying, well, this role stands on its own, but these 2 roles still kind of work together, because the tanks could do whatever the heck they wanted because they fulfilled all 3 roles on their own. Obvious problem needed to be fixed. So they dialed it back in the other way, but they swung a bit far in that the level of play you need to hit that minimum survivability threshold that is within your personal control, and I'm not counting calling out for an external cooldown, because as soon as you say, I need a pain suppression, then it's out of your hands. That's not in your control anymore, so now that is out of your hands of your own survivability. That's how many there are and how frequent this is required is seen as a problem by some people. Obviously, this is a team activity, a group activity, we're working together, but you can have extremes with that, and right now it feels a lot like that. So what happens is we have a relatively low bar of survivability outside of specific periods when you need an external cooldown or a defensive cooldown. So if the survivability bar is fairly low, and you go, well, I don't really need more survivability, what do you start ranking yourself off of? Damage. Because to be quite honest, there's not too much that's engaging about fights unless they're designed with that in mind. There's several fights this tier alone where the tank mechanic is either run away, get knocked away, or lose control of your character.
Yeah.
That's so fun. Let me tell you how much I like not playing my character. But I mean, active mitigation in a lot of ways has been neutered and kind of gutted. It's there.
Yeah.
It's required, but at the same time, it's not the bulk of your survivability.
So, which it should be. It should be like you should be focusing on consistently reducing your damage, not waiting and waiting and waiting. Oh, here comes the big mechanic. All right, just use a bunch of cooldowns and then
you need to be more engaged as a tank, not how much damage can I push out, because that's all we have to do right now, and I feel like that is a kind of a problem. The fantasy of a tank is you are the stalwart defender of your group. You are trying to keep the attention of the mob threat, at the same time reducing the damage you're taking to manageable levels so that the other classes supporting you, the healers, can keep you intact while your damage dealers kill the mob. So the problem there is well, it's too much in one way because the tanks are all basically threat bots at this point. And
So is the goal, the end ideal goal, that a tank should be able to survive by themselves, played well, without ever taking healing or cooldowns?
I think
not. No,
no, because we'd be back in Mr. Pandaria again.
Yeah.
I think if a tank requires roughly, maybe slightly more healing than, like, say, standard raid healing, and this is personal opinion at this point because there's a whole wide scale we can swing on.
Yeah.
I think that's about right or closer to it.
So the standard average healing that the healers would do should sustain the tank, essentially. Is what
let me put it this way. So we were progressing on Mythic Kilrog today, correct?
Right.
Not exactly the hardest of boss, but for us, a new boss, I'm 714. I don't grossly outgear the fight. All right? I think I used guard 6 times in that fight. Not because I needed it, but because I wanted to pad healing meters. Like, I did the survivability bar is so low on some fights, it's embarrassing. Like, absolutely embarrassing. And the only thing that keeps you engaged in a fight like that is make sure you have your active mitigation up for this one little cast so you don't die. Ooh.
But, like, if you imagine the raid is taking, let's say everybody normal raiders have a health pool of 500, let's just say. And there's a raid AoE that does 200 damage. All right, so that's, what, 80%? The whole raid's at, I can't do math, 60%? The tanks have more health than that. Let's say the tanks have 1,000 health, so they're at 80% health. The tanks should probably be taking, relative to the raid, the same amount of damage from the boss. So another 20% damage from the boss is what they, maybe should be taking. Then the whole raid looks like, okay, we have to decide, all right, do we use the single target heals to keep the tank up, or do we use the AoE heals to keep the raid up? And I think that's an interesting decision for a healer, but we're kind of veering off topic there. But, focusing more on tanks, like, should they have more, how much control should they have over their survivability? Obviously, as a tank player, you want to feel like you have almost all of it. But again, you can't discount healers. They have to be engaged. You have to be healed by a healer. That's just, healers need to heal the tank. Otherwise, that's really boring.
Right, and then for Brewmaster specifically, though, we've got a 4-piece that freezes your health pool for periods of time.
Right.
Yeah.
And it gives more power to the player, but I'm not sure if it's healthy for the Trinity, if you will.
No.
Because you go from, oh, he's fine, I'm going to go play over here for a little bit, and then suddenly he's spiked dead. Because, whoops, he looked fine. My bad.
Yeah,
extra power is not always interesting. I mean, just look at
it's pretty
Dragon Ball Z.
clear based on the design philosophy they came in from Mr. Pandaria. That's what they're aiming towards. Like, they wanted tanks to not be DPS bots. They wanted them to be more reliant on healers, but also have more control over their defense. I think they failed in that.
There was this weird thing too with the tank squish,
right?
Where and this was like early beta, and I'm not quoting anything because I couldn't give you a direct quote, but it was roughly in the vein of, we want if there's an emergency, an arms warrior could like toss on a shield or something and taunt the boss and pop a cooldown and survive a second or two.
Right.
Like, because bosses were hitting so hard that was not
it's
possible.
like every time that a tank would die, and even if you got an instant battle res out, they would turn around and one shot
and
any
kill
melee.
a couple people.
Yeah.
And
they also wanted to get away from that. Well, let's just make the boss hit harder mechanic. They didn't want tanks to either, oh, I missed a cooldown, so I'm dead. Like, they didn't want that, but they failed in that. So many times we see, oh, I missed my guard, I'm dead.
It's a really difficult balance to strike there, because you look at the beginning. So when you have a long instance like Foundry or Hellfire Citadel, where you go from Hellfire Assault to Archimonde, or what was it, Orgorger to Blackhand, like, by the time you reach at the beginning of the instance, the bosses are like, are these even hitting me? Like, I don't even know. Do I have to do stuff? And then you get to the last boss, and it's like, all right, he hit me twice, I'm dead. And that's too big of a, spectrum of damage numbers to go through. Like,
I think that's why they implemented the item level increase as you went along, so they could make those...
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah, make those a little less painful. Like, because if everybody's well geared from the first few bosses, then you have to make the last boss hit like a truck. But if the most powerful gear comes just from the last couple bosses, you get to that last boss, they don't have to make it hit.
I think there's a lot of times the problem is the damage going out doesn't quite scale properly with the gear.
No, it doesn't.
And it's so you go from the boss is literally sitting there tickling you with a feather to this boss is now chunking you for almost all of your health or more.
Right.
And I mean, Paladin's last tier actually had a horrible problem where outside of Shield of the Righteous, they got globaled by Blackhand. Like, absolutely crushed for a while until they were in really freaking good gear, and even then it was risky. Obviously, Brewmasters were overpowered at the time, but when that happens, like, what is he supposed to do to the tank? Well, I blew all my cooldowns, guys. Good luck, healers. It's all on you now. I hope you can heal me from 100% to 0 to 100% again.
Something like, all right, so like getting back on the kind of the topic, which is, how much do you feel like tanks should be in more control of their survivability or not?
I think it could definitely swing more back closer to Mists of Pandaria, for sure.
But not as far.
Not as far.
Not that far, yeah.
No, because then you're making the other rules irrelevant.
You're flying off the swing.
But I think that, and it's actually going to be a really hard balance because they have so many difficulty levels now, and even through an instance, there's that progression of difficulty, roughly. There needs to be a line of, if you don't play this well, you fail, and your healers can't help you, I think. Maybe more particularly with the mythic level than, say, the heroic or normal. But I'd almost say that even that level is non-existent almost for normal and heroic, outside of pop X cooldown for X ability, because those are there are abilities strictly made just to make you eat cooldowns.
I think they may be aiming, with this recent change to normals, I think they may be aiming heroic to be a little more challenging next tier. So we'll see if that pops up. But it would be nice to have the tanks care again, instead of like, lol, I just take whatever, and I have a guard for a million damage, so I'm fine.
I ran double DPS trinkets for Council because the damage was insignificant for progression.
Right, and that shouldn't happen.
No, I mean that's what Mizume does when he's scumbagging like months after the content's
Trust
done.
me, bud. I know. I had to heal it.
That's not what you should be doing for your first kill, though. Even relatively, actually, I don't even know if we were higher geared than like when y'all were doing it, Monkyo. Like average rate eye level,
Probably, like
just below 720.
I don't know. I had like no gear from anything, so.
But I mean, it just feels wrong that the only way I feel as a tank I can contribute is just doing damage, because survivability it doesn't feel like it's too much on me outside of did I help with the cooldown rotation or not.
Right.
I mean,
that gives us a good window into DPS. I mean, it seems like this tier has a ton of these kind of DPS checks that you need your healers and you need your tanks to be doing the crazy DPS that they're doing to keep up and to get these kills. So in the DPS role, of course, this one is going to be better than the tanks and the healers in design, because there's a single purpose: do as much damage as possible. It's not a zero-sum game. So,
Right.
but they tried really hard in Myst, from the Myst to WoD, to get rid of stackable offensive cooldowns. And they did.
Oh yeah.
They did some, but they didn't go far enough, obviously.
I think with offensive, I think what's left offensively, really, because they got rid of Amp Magic, which wasn't really an offense, but they got rid of
took
Hunter.
them until this tier to do that.
Yeah,
I mean, they realized what a mistake that was.
What was it? Skull Banner.
Skull Banner,
Tricks.
Storm Totem, or whatever the hell.
Oh, Stormlash, yeah.
Stormlash.
It's really just Bloodlust at this point. Like, it's fine, you know?
Yeah.
That's fine. Yeah,
that's all they have at
And
this
I'm
point.
okay with DPS, since they're the ones doing damage. I'm okay with them having
those are fine.
offensive cooldowns. It's the defensive one, Smoke Bomb, the warrior one that I always forget.
The Vigilance and Rally, yeah.
Yeah.
Vigilance,
But
Rally.
yes, so the topic is, more of, should DPS have control over other people's survivability or their own survivability and healing? So you look at a class like, let's think, Boomkins heal for a lot, I think, with Nature's Vigil, I think it's called.
Mm-hmm.
They pop Nature's Vigil and they just do a ton of damage. They do a significant amount of healing. Shadow Priest, an even better example. They do a ton of damage with Vampiric Embrace, or a ton of healing with Vampiric Embrace. And it just feels like that's out of that scope. You're a damage dealer. Your responsibility, the only thing you should be responsible for, is doing damage. And when you bring elements like healing and damage reduction for the raid or for a single player, particularly a tank, into that kind of formula, it upsets the balance and it makes them more valuable than others that don't bring those kind of things. So I think they should, but should DPS have fewer personal defensive cooldowns, not like raid cooldowns, but personal defensive cooldowns? I think they should, because it allows healers to be the focus of your survivability, and it takes away from, or I should say, it adds gameplay to a DPS's kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? I guess mindset. I don't know, wasn't worried about
So
that.
here's, I'm gonna I'll throw a quick wrench in that though. How do you feel though about, because we have this raid setting where ideally we can bring almost one of every class, if not at least one.
Yeah.
How do you feel about things like Death Knights bringing Gorfiend's Grasp, which isn't necessarily a direct...
But that's another topic. Gorfiend's is a special little case where no other class brings anything like it. And
Rogues being more
it's
survivable, that kind of
crazy
thing.
bad.
Like, rogues have traditionally been incredibly survivable, and that's been their niche for a very long time.
Right.
Like,
You look at special classes like rogues and hunters and mages that can completely negate mechanics of a fight, and that's what the fights are pretty much designed around. You design a fight where it's really easy to do it if you have a mage. What's the word I'm looking for? They kind of fade out. Not
Invisibility.
Not invis. It's
Greater
the other
invis.
one. No, it's the other one.
Evanescence?
Yes, Evanescence of mechanic, and they don't get hit by it.
Okay.
Cloak of Shadows on a rogue makes damage or whatever it is. Hunters, deterrence, double deterrence. These classes they have these extra abilities that allow them to survive things you're not supposed to survive. Things that you're supposed to do as a group. You look at a mechanic like on Zul'Farrak, right? In Mythic, the black hole has an extra effect called Singularity. If you go into it, you take damage. It's split among all people that are hit. It's like 1 million damage or something like that. But you can't reduce it by cooldowns. Like things like diffuse magic don't work or aren't supposed to work. I'm hearing reports that Zen Med works for some reason. But anyway, those kind of mechanics where they say it's split among all the people in there. The idea is that you go in, you soak it together. But you can't do that. Right? When you're progressing on a fight, you can't do that. So what do? You just send a Rogue in with Cloak, or you send a DK in with AMS, or you have a Druid with 2 million health go in there and just take it because he's a boss. It's But these kind of survivability cooldowns allow the raid to completely bypass mechanics that would otherwise be interesting to kind of strategize around and just play with. Because as soon as you start removing mechanics from a raid or from a fight, regardless of how you do it, I remember some of I don't know if it was Chinese or players, it was some of the Asian guild where they sat in the water, I think it was, on Iron Maidens, and they just killed the boss from the water, dealing with no mechanics. It's how is this interesting? Why are you even playing the game right now? It just ruins the fun of the game when you remove mechanics with defensive cooldowns. But my focus was on survivability, right? Ideally, survivability for non-tanks should be in the hands of the healers. Like, there should be more unavoidable raid damage in raids. Like, I want that so bad because that's a healer topic, but that'll force healers to always be on their toes, and you're always counting on your healers for survivability.
You mean like early Beast Lord Darmak when he had a crap ton of raid damage?
Yes. Like a
When he
PTR, I
actually
think it
was,
the beta.
a lot of people were excited for that fight because like, oh my gosh, there's so much raid damage,
was
and
great.
then they like went, nope,
Yeah,
got
they
rid
took
of all
that
of
out.
it.
That was so surprising.
So-
But even like Blast Furnace was a good example, you know?
Are you mainly talking about defensive cooldowns that are almost complete negations? Ice Block, Deterrence,
Sure,
Cloak of
I
Shadows,
suppose.
Diffuse Magic?
Yeah.
Or are you talking like the
I
Dampen
think like a
Harm,
shamanistic rage or fine, you know, things that just, you know you're taking a little bit of damage and you want to reduce it by a little bit. I think
Yeah,
things like
Fortifying
Diffuse
Brew.
Magic are ridiculous. Fort Brew is a good example of a good cooldown.
Touch of
Diffuse
Karma.
Magic is too good. Touch of Karma is, yeah, I
They
think it's
nerfed
interesting
it. They
as
nerfed
a,
it down to the right amount. 50% health.
but,
is
yeah,
okay, yeah.
but they doubled health, so it's kind of like a moot,
Right.
nerf. But yeah, I think those kind of things, the small reductions are good because it does mean something. You know, you are reducing damage by 20, 25, 30%, whatever the case may be. But you're not like completely negating a mechanic, and I feel like that's bad gameplay when you're completely removing mechanic from the game. And you stack enough of those classes, and you know the healing goes to
Rogues and mages
Just
are
like
notorious for
Mark
negating
of the
mechanics.
Necromancer
Exactly.
on Council with Diffuse Magic. You bring enough monks
Yeah,
and you
exactly.
just don't care.
it's kind of silly, and you know it's just boring. But anyway, like I guess we kind of touched on this already, but like DPS, should they even bring more cooldowns? If you drop the raid defensive cooldowns like Vigilance and Smoke Bomb, particularly Vampiric Embrace and maybe Nature's Vigil, you know, do you drop those things altogether? Do you replace them with DPS cooldowns?
Yeah.
You know, I do feel like DPS, if they're going to have cooldowns for the raid, they should be DPS oriented. They should not be
Yes.
healing and defensive oriented.
I would love to see more than just Bloodlust out there. Like,
Yeah.
I want as a raid leader, it's like, well, I know that we really need to get this guy down, but I don't want to hit Bloodlust this early. We need it for later. I want like all right, give me a 10% haste increase right here. You know, smaller,
Yeah.
meaningful cooldowns to help you get past certain points.
Would you say now that there isn't a 10-man size like that is very restrictive, and now we have a larger size that's more inclusive of how many people we can bring, would you say bringing things back like Skull Banner and Stormlash would now be more acceptable, even if they were toned down from what they once were?
The problem is you have to make sure that everybody brings something. That way, you know,
Whether it's a
somebody isn't left out.
Stormlash or a Gorfiend's Grasp or something.
Well, yeah, anything useful. You know, if you're talking about raid cooldowns, like, you know, if you have Skull Banner on Warriors, then Rogues have to have something. I don't know, tricks for the raid or something. You know, it's like, because if you start bringing back something, and it's Stormlash, for example, if it's good enough, you're going to want more of them. So you bring in a couple of shamans, so you figure out how many shamans you need to balance out raid. If the shamans are low DPS, but Stormlash adds DPS, you figure out the balance. And, you know, burst is almost always better than consistency, so you err on the side of burst. So you bring more shamans. And if you just keep adding stuff in, boom, 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 it just gets kind of crazy, and you enter this
We
arms
go
race.
right back to the arms race that
Yeah,
we
it
just
never
got out
ends.
of, mostly,
Yeah.
kind of, sort of.
It'd be nice
So
if
it's like-
everybody
it's a
had
question.
a slightly different raid boost, like maybe
Yeah.
base it off of your that main stat that you get, and like so, Windwalkers would be able to boost, do a burst multi-strike on everybody or something like that. But then you would have to tie in all of those into a raid-wide cooldown, similar to Bloodlust. Because
Yeah.
otherwise, just you would have a buff of something for every single minute of the fight, which is not good.
So the alternative, and I wanted to reference this a few times, but I've kind of been holding back. But I kind of have to now. Like, there's another MMO out there, Final Fantasy XIV, and it does a lot of things right and does a lot of things wrong, of course. But particularly for raiding, I think they did a lot of things right. For example, what we're talking about right now, offensive raid cooldowns. There's one offensive raid cooldown. That's a big one, at least, and it's their limit break. It's essentially the ring, the legendary ring from WoW, where it's shared among the group, and it's shared among all roles, not just DPS or whoever hit it. And it changes depending on who used it. So if you mentioned you had a legendary ring effect, but it's not just a damage increase, it just does damage, or it does healing, or it does damage reduction, and it's used by the whole raid and not just a particular role set. And if each damage dealer, I was trying to fool with my mic, I don't have it on my face anymore. If each damage dealer brought a different type of legendary ring effect, like one does AoE, one does single target, one does cleave, that might be an interesting way to figure out what you want to bring for a particular fight. But
you have to have that spread out with enough things where it's like if you don't have that cleave and you need the cleave for this one and you don't have a monk or something like that, then you need it somewhere else.
Now I'm not saying that's the best decision for a while, because it means if you figure out that 9 out of 12 fights require a lot of single target DPS, then you're going to stack the single target legendary powers, whatever you want to call it. It's just an alternative. There's no one good solution, or else they would have done it already, and I'm not smart enough to figure out that one good solution. So it's just a nice thing to think about, is what can you do to make DPS feel like they're affecting other DPS? Because as a healer, I feel like I'm affecting other healers with how I play, and they affect
usually
me
negatively.
But as a DPS, you're just kind of like you're playing your own game. Like, what if I'm playing a DPS warrior and there's a rogue right next to me? I really don't care what he's doing. Like, he can do whatever. He's doing more damage than me because his cooldowns line up perfectly with his stupid trinkets. But it's like, I don't really care what he's doing. And I think it'd be interesting if we had more intra role play?
Yeah,
intra role play.
Role play, yeah, because like each DPS just does whatever they want to do. And one thing that I do want to say before we move on, as a healer, I want DPS to keep their defensive cooldowns because I want to blame them when they fucking die. Because otherwise, they are going to blame us every time they die. But
that's much easier for us to figure out, right? Because it makes you feel like you're a boss, right? If your whole raid's like almost dead and you somehow recover from it, and you're like, yeah, damn, we're good. Like, that would be so fun to do. Like, I feel so good when we go into a fight like Gorfiend for the first time. We saw Feast of Souls, and like the whole raid was getting low because the ghosts were blowing up on us, and it felt so good to be so powerful and recover from that. Or watch the shaman recover us from that, whatever. But as a healing core, it felt good.
Right.
I think that
I think, and obviously we've been kind of dragging on this a little bit, so I think something that would help the DPS feel like they're part of the team is a lot of based on encounters as well, because the DPS have that freedom, if you will, to do the encounter. And a lot of times I'm a little jealous of DPS because they get to see the fight, whereas I get to see a boss in front of my face.
Right.
But I think encounters working and making teamwork more critical to them would help a little bit with that as well.
Yeah.
Instead of just blow boss up.
All right, well, let's move on to healers.
Right, so this final role is kind of echoing what we said in the tank version, which was, do healers have too many tank cooldowns, too many single target kind of damage reduction cooldowns? And I feel like they do. But that's I think that's more in the tank side where it's, these things belong to tanks. This is the tank's responsibility to do. And you should just be responsible for recovering from the damage that is done. Unfortunately, raid design dictates how we play, even though they say that they design raids based on what players can do, but it's kind of, you could go both ways with
I'm
that.
personally more of a fan of the idea of a healer tank cooldown, if you will, or whatever, not being so much of keep the tank from dropping to X mechanic, and more of crap, I've fallen behind on the tank.
Yeah.
Right, I agree.
I need to
That's why
help him
Life
somehow.
Cocoon is you have that double bonus if the friggin' buff would stay on for longer than the thing.
That's right.
But it still fulfills the purpose of it stops the mechanic, though. And
Right.
I guess healing taken increases aren't bad because they make HOTS and stuff more effective.
Nice.
Even though they're relatively weak versus an actual damage reduction. Don't mind the choo-choo train, by the way.
That's Stilgar triggered. Oh, God.
Right, yeah. I'll be right back. I'm going to go be triggered somewhere. But I don't mind them having cooldowns that help them catch up with healing.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, I think we've iterated on 1,000 times at this point. I don't like healers having tank cooldowns.
Yeah. you know, it's the tank's responsibility to reduce the damage they're taking. That is the tank role. And when healers do it, you make tanks go like, well, what am I supposed to do? Like, I guess I'll just save my cooldowns for when the healers can't get me. And it's like, that's not fun to not have to hit your own buttons because other guys are doing it for you.
Yeah,
but like, go ahead.
I think that I'm definitely on the same boat as a healer. It's like I tend to use Life Cocoon as a, oh crap, you're about to die, keep you from dying button. Whereas a lot of teams use it as a, oh, well, use it to prevent a mechanic from actually taking place. Because as LeBlue has told me time and time again, absorbs are better than healing. So damage, how is it you say it? Damage prevented is better than healing.
Damage healed.
Yeah, it's better, you know, like mathematically or however you want to say it, but it's not as fun. Like, it's just
it feels awesome when the tank, when like you see that burst coming down on the tank, and you're like, Life Cocoon, I save you.
Like here, let me ask you what looks cooler: the tank who's at like 1 health and he gets a Life Cocoon, or the tank that's at 1 health and he gets a Lay on Hands, and you just see his health bar spike back up.
Yeah, it's like you get that immediate feedback as a player. You know, when you playing a damage dealer, you see the damage numbers. I can't imagine there's many. I know there are some. I did it for a while. Damage dealers that don't have their damage numbers displayed. It's fun to see. It helps you to know if you're actually meleeing the boss without looking at your stupid little gnome rogue trying to hit the boss. You know, you want that feedback. You know, tanks see how much damage they're taking. Healers should be able to see healing, and when you use a shield of some kind, absorb shield of some kind, you just don't see it. They just kind of sit at that health bar to hit them at until somebody heals them. And it's useful, no doubt. It's useful. Nobody's doubting the utility of these spells. It's just not as fun, I think, for me. You know, it's not as interesting. I want that feedback when I hit a button. But another, you know, topic for healers is damage. You know, I've always said it's very important for healers. So if you're not doing anything, if you're not doing healing, you should be doing damage. But how much damage? You know, like right now, monks do a lot of damage relative to the other healers. Other healers can do fine damage, but it's mostly bursty. Druids with Heart of the Wild can do very significant damage. With Dream of Cenarius, they can do decent damage over the course of a fight. But none is as good as the monk, you know.
Right.
Shaman's high burst. Priest damage is terrible. Holy isn't terrible, but Holy...
Who plays Holy?
What else is there?
That's a funny joke.
Paladins can actually do some burst, but they sacrifice being able to heal, and they have to use wings and the stupid glyph. It's whatever. But should they do more damage? Should they do less damage? Should they do damage at all? I think to the latter question,
with the monk in particular, and I think they're learning this lesson with the Disc Priest going into the Legion. The problem with doing the 50-50 is then you get things like Gorefiend, where Feast of Souls, where I do more healing than the other two combined DPSing, which that probably shouldn't happen. You know?
No, it shouldn't have. But you still do. Even if they did do more healing than you while healing, you're contributing more. Like you're not doing that much less healing. Yeah. Like I was doing like what I don't know, like 80k DPS on Gorefiend during Feast of Souls, and 120, 130k, whatever it is, healing. Like that's ridiculous, and it's fun, no doubt.
Yeah,
but
it's really cool. I love doing that. But yeah, it's not good.
It's kind of silly, powerful.
And there's always going to be those types of encounters. We saw Butcher in Highmaul where you'd use Chi Explosion and just go complete ham. Right. And so when you have those kind of hybrid DPS things, the monk is kind of special in and of itself until we get to the Disc Priest, where we can go into a mode where we do 50% damage, 50% healing the whole time, and we can keep doing that forever pretty much, because we are completely self-sustained unless we're rushing Jade Winding every 5 seconds, and even then we're contributing enough mana to soak that up. I think it's really cool fantasy-wise, but I would prefer they design the encounters where I have to be in Serpent Stance a lot more, where there's a lot of healing that has to go out, and because there's just so much right now where I feel like there's nothing to do in Serpent, so I have no other choice but to be in the Crane. It should.
Yeah, it's just the lack of raid damage.
Right.
Is what
it
that
should
is.
be a choice to go, not a well.
Right.
you have to be in Crane right now because there's nothing else to do. It should be all right, well, we're about to lose to this DPS race right now. The other healers are kind of falling behind, but we have to get this down, so I switch in and start bashing the boss in. It'd be nice if it was that kind of choice instead of, well, there's nothing to do, so I'll just DPS.
So if you look at, having choice is really important, and not like one of those fake choices like where you have 3 talents and only one of them's useful.
Right.
Like, choice is something that's, both options are fine, but one is better for a situation, another is better for others. If you look at a class or a spec like Mistweaver, they have 2 stances, right? You have Serpent stance and Crane stance, and one allows you to heal, one allows you to DPS, but you can't do significant healing while in Crane stance, and you can't do significant damage, or any damage, really. I mean, crackling is terrible while in Serpent.
Yeah.
Whereas, and that's kind of my biggest gripe about it, is that I can't easily swap back and forth between the two. There's a huge opportunity cost, there's a cheat cost, there's a time cost to swapping back and forth. Whereas like a druid can just throw out a couple rasps while his hots are healing. The shaman can throw out an Ellie Blast and a lava burst. That's a huge burst. It's cost him 2 globals. And I'll reference the other game again, Final Fantasy, because I think this is one thing. They did healing really well, and one of the things they did really well for healers is they gave them the option of this thing. Cleric stance. And what this does is, basically they have 2 stats which determine either spell damage or spell healing, and what it does is it swaps them. So you can swap in and out of this cleric stance, which is basically like a DPS stance for healers. And so you lose a lot of your healing. I don't know what it is. Maybe like 20, 40%. I don't know the numbers.
It's a pretty good chunk.
It's significant, yeah. So you lose a lot of healing, but you do that much more damage. And it's like it's this choice that you make, and it's got like a cooldown on it or something, and a time before you can cast it again. But it's a neat mechanic that's like, okay, let me swap into this phase where I can do a bunch of damage. I can still toss out heals if I wanted to, so you still maintain that rested druid shaman kind of play where you can always heal if you want to, but it's a choice you make. You're not completely locked into it. You don't lose anything except, a little bit of throughput in the one that you're not in. So if you're in the DPS stance, you lose a little healing throughput. But that's the choice you make, and it makes it interesting gameplay for a healer to say, okay, I know the mechanics, I've planned around it, I can go cleric, or whatever you want to call it, for this amount of time, and then I got to swap back to healing, or drop out of cleric.
It's almost as if you took a hybrid of the WoD and the Mists playstyle, where in Mists you had all the buttons.
Yes.
But you had no, like, I do more DPS now, so it's like you go into Crane stance, and then you still have all the buttons, and you can heal, but you're not going to heal as much.
Yeah, imagine if Crane stance just, instead of locking you out of healing abilities, or Serpent stance locking you out of Crane abilities, you still, like you said, you still had all those buttons. It's just that Crane made you do more damage, Serpent made you do more healing. That was it. And it's like, I think that's a fine balance. And if every spec of healer had that, I think they'd all be more interesting, and they wouldn't be this huge, outlier in monks.
Right.
They all can heal, and they can all DPS, and they can all contribute when damage is low, because the way Blizzard designs their fights is that it's a roller coaster where there's a ton of valleys and just a couple hills throughout the fight where, no damage, oh shoot, we're gonna die, alright, no damage, oh shoot, we're gonna die. Each of those, oh shoot, we're gonna die moments are covered by some cooldown. Avenging Wrath, or Tranquility, or Revival, or Healing Tide. It's ridiculous. And it leaves you a lot of time in DPS, and other healers just don't feel like they can DPS all that much. Monks are lucky, but I still feel like there's improvements to be made there for healer DPS.
Alright, so let's move on to cooldowns. Specifically, like Revival, Trank, those types of cooldowns. Are they too strong, just right?
I was under the impression, my feelings on it were that they're too strong. But I had talked to Kev, who was our Resta Shaman during progression, and he felt like they're actually weaker now than they've ever been. And looking at the numbers, he's right. They're actually weaker now than they have ever been. They're still really strong, but relative to your overall healing done, these cooldowns are not doing as much. So I don't know if they need to be weaker, but I still feel like they're too big of a part of overall healing, not because of their strength, but because of, like what I just said, the way the fights are designed. So, if you have fights like Ore Gorger, or you have fights like Blast Furnace, where the damage is constant,
or more random, maybe?
random, like, you look at a fight like, what was the tank fight right after Galacrest? I can't remember his name.
Iron Juggernaut.
Yeah, like that damage was random meaning this guy's gonna die. You don't know who this guy is, but guy X is gonna die if he gets hit by these couple mechanics that he can't avoid because
unless you have Disc Priests.
Yeah, but you have to like shield the entire. Or you don't shield, you just do damage. But anyway, like random is fine if it's random across the whole raid, but random hitting one person or a couple people is to me it's not that interesting.
I think that. I think when I'm talking random, I'm talking more, well, DBM says this is going to be coming up in 20 seconds, so prepare your cooldown.
Oh, yeah, that might be okay. But I was thinking, like, constant damage, like aura damage. Like, if you remember, I'm going to go back to Blast Furnace because I think it's one of the best examples of a healer fight that we've seen so far, where you had Feldspar, the main boss. He was up for however long in the fight, and he had this burn aura on him where if you were near him, he did AoE damage to you. And you couldn't stop it, you couldn't prevent it, you could shield it, obviously, but, he just always did it. And then you always had these blasts going off from the furnace itself, and the blast damage ramped up over time. I feel like those kind of unavoidable damage mechanics are what is important for healers, to make healer gameplay interesting. Yeah. If you always have something to heal, and it's always the same threat no matter how far you go into a fight, then healers are always going to be needed. You're going to stop dropping healers for more DPS because the amount of DPS you bring does not affect the amount of damage you're taking. It shortens the fight length, sure, but you're not really ever hurting because you're running out of mana later on the fight. You're hurting because this mob is doing a bunch of damage to the raid and you want to kill it quickly. That's the one thing Blast Furnace failed at, was that it was a lot of the damage was caused by these mobs just being up for too long. I think they were the fire callers that would put the explosive debuff on you, get volatile fire. So it really just comes down to raid design. If less fights were dependent on these little mobs that are going to die in 2 seconds to do all the raid damage, and it was more on environmental damage or the main boss that's going to live until the end of the fight, if the damage was shifted onto those two things, healers would be much more interested in these gameplay or in these fights, and cooldowns would have a much smaller impact because you're always healing, and these cooldowns are just kind of like, oh, we're kind of falling behind. It's kind of one of I think the blue and you were saying, it's just it should be like a catch-up thing, not a don't worry about this mechanic. This one button will take care of it. Just like we said with DPS, if we have this mechanic that needs to be soaked by 8 players to survive it, well, just have the rogue hit his one button and take care of it. It's the same thing for healers. If this giant mechanic's going to hit the raid for 80% of the health, don't worry, revival, moving on. That's not interesting gameplay, and I wish they would do more damage that you had to just take to the face.
Right. All right, well, any last thoughts on role design before we move on?
Fix hitboxes, and give me something to do other than try to pretend I'm a DPS, and a bad one at that.
I think they should lock out all DPS trinkets from tanks.
No. I didn't get to say it when we were doing the roll thing, and I'm going to say it really, really quickly. I would love if there were just even avoidable cones that I had to move from time to time.
Yeah. What
after they fixed the hitbox issues.
You've been playing too much Final Fantasy, but
what I would actually love to see is you have the main tank holding the boss, right? And they have stuff to dodge. They have to do mechanics. That off tank is not doing much most of the time. I would love to see, like you mentioned, Monkey, this fantasy of the tank being the stalwart defender. I would love to see mechanics where, okay, teammate X is going to get one shot or take a ton of damage or get knocked into another realm or something like that, and the tank has to get in there and soak it or something like that. I think that would be really cool.
There's quite a few of those mechanics in that other game that I'm not going to mention again. It's like they did a lot of things right in that other game, and I wish WoW would kind of take more, take some notes from that instead of just trying to push this. I don't even know what it is. Like, the design is so all over the place that you could see some really good things here and there.
Trinity. It's a convoluted trinity.
It is. It really is, and it's just they need to
every role except for DPS can do 2 roles at the same time. So it's kind of weird. All right, well, I think now it's time to travel to the Peak of Serenity, the home for all monks in
Zen pilgrimage.
Monks, assemble!
Alright, so there's something in here about Warcraft logs. Who put that in?
I did. Yeah, Kira, the guy who runs and makes all the Warcraft log sites, Warcraft logs. Yeah, he recently, at least if I read it right and I remember right, there's always been healer DPS rankings on there, but you don't see them when you go to the rankings tab. But I think he made it so that they show up by default now. You don't have to go searching for them. So it's just another thing you can go see. It doesn't. Not a huge deal, but
they also are putting in weighted DPS.
Oh yeah.
So
that's
what that means is that I believe what this means is like if a rogue is super good at this fight all the time, you can see how good he actually is because it'll be weighted for the rogue. So it's like if
it's weighted per mob,
right?
Yeah.
Per mob.
So
yeah.
So like the boss might be weighted as a 1, and every point of damage that you do to the boss gives you 1 point or whatever it is, and then this ad over here, it's not really important, is weighted at 0.3. So if somebody's putting all their damage into the ad or doing a bunch of AoE and it doesn't count as much as hitting the boss would, then you'll see that.
So
it's
you'll
basically
be able to
allows
see
you to raid
the people who are just scumbagging the whole time and not really doing anything to help.
It's quantifying scumbaggery is what it is.
That's going to be awesome because I may or may not have some scumbags on Rolling Thunder.
And you can set your own weights. I think he added that in, or he's planning to add that in at the very least, where you can set your own weights where there's a pin attached. So you could say within this part of the fight, these things are worth more than they are the rest of the fight, and that's so powerful.
These ads aren't dying because they're focusing on the boss.
Right,
so
exactly.
I want to find out.
Yeah, it's a good use. Yeah.
Okay. And then Hina Lover says that they're going to be adding weighted healing as well.
Oh yeah, they were talking about that. That's going to be interesting to see how he does that. Yeah, that's pretty tough.
Okay. So if you want to help support the show, we have come up with T-shirts. We have a couple different designs, and they're at our D20 store, so you can go to d20crit.com and click on Shop up at the top, and you can see our Monk Meditation logo. They'll be available in Mistweaver Green, Windwalker Blue, Brewmaster Gold, Monk Teal, and Black. And the sizes range all the way from small all the way up to like 4XL. And we also have one that our lovely model LeBlue will be showing off right now.
Oh, put the pants on. No.
In Dave We Trust. So this is a hoodie, not yet available on the store. We custom made this for LeBlue, but we may have the hoodie showing up eventually. So this is a design that's featuring our lovely Dave statue. And so in Dave We Trust, and that will be available in Brewmaster Gold, Monk Green, and Black. That is available on the store at d20crit.com. So these funds don't go in our pockets. We don't see a penny of them, but what it does do is it goes towards helping the show hosting at D20Crit. So they host all of our audio podcasts. They pay for the bandwidth, so by buying from them, that helps keep the show up and running. So...
You could tell LeBlue practiced that. Stand in front of a mirror for 4 hours yesterday.
I was running around a casino wearing this, so yeah.
Yeah, I have one in black already with the Monk Meditation logo, but I'm getting one in Mistweaver Green to show off my Mistweaver, and then possibly showing what I might be doing next expansion. I got a Brewmaster Gold in Dave We Trust.
Don't let him fool you. It's actually Rogue Yellow.
All right, and so we have a question in the dojo. Do you feel that the artifact weapon is... Sorry, my thing is messing up. What does the rest of that say?
I got it. From Tiger Crane, do you feel like artifact weapons is Blizz admitting that gearing up has become boring and dull?
I don't know if I had worded that way. I am a huge fan of the artifact weapon system, mainly because I never get my effing weapons until the very end of the tier.
Well, you're still not going to get them because you need the upgrade items to make it better.
Still, you're going to have a weapon that's good starting at the beginning, and if you're like the legendary, as long as you're there doing your stuff, you're going to be leveling it up. So it's like you don't have to depend on RNG to get that drop. Otherwise, like back in friggin' tier 15, I didn't get a weapon drop the entire tier. So I was still using my shot touch 496. So
I think this is a potential stab at some non-linear progression per se. I'm actually kind of excited about it because it'll be different. I think gearing up is still a lot of fun. I do enjoy getting new pieces of gear and stuff because it's part of the MMO's progression, and that's kind of a key factor to it. I'm very curious to kind of see how they play it out progression-wise, because the way I understand it, it's not tied to just, well, you ran your LFRs today, right, Johnny? Did you get your quest items? But there's supposedly supposed to be some world content tied to it.
Right.
So
it seems like there's going to be a ton of different ways to get the things you need. So
there's not much yet. Need to know more.
Right.
It's something you said with non-linear progression, especially with the artifact weapons. It's like the way I understood it was it's kind of like a tree that you fill out with different, special abilities on it or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's only going to be interesting if you can't get all of them. Because if you get all of them, there's no really point in having any of those choices.
I think they said toward the end you would, though. I thought they said at the end of the expansion you would.
Like, that would be so worthless. Like, I want that choice.
I think it's fine if it's near the end of the expansion, because it's like for progression in most of the expansion, you're going to be making interesting choices the whole time.
Yeah. Non-linear, I guess, is the wrong word. I guess I meant post-max level progression is what I think I'm more looking towards.
You hit 105 or is it 110?
110.
You hit 110, and it's like, all right, got my weapon, good to go. It's like, it's nice that you can be building that even outside of raid, even in non-raider. There goes the webcam. Bye monkey.
So, but do you guys think it'll be gated? Like, do you think we'll only be able to get, like, say 3 out of 9 slots the first tier, or 4 out of 8 for the first tier, and then by the end of the second tier we can get the last 4? Like, what do you guys think?
Probably. I don't know.
Gated.
Whatever way they do it is.
I think it would actually be cool to have it gated, because that way you do have that interesting choice. Well, I only can get 3 of these choices, so I have to actually make a choice in which one I want. As long as there's not like, well, this one is mathematically superior, so I'm going to click this because it's a cookie cutter. As long as they're actually interesting choices and good, awesome.
You want to hear something weird? I want it to resemble the old talent system, like where you had the plus 1%, whatever. You know why?
No.
Because I like seeing myself. I like filling in the blocks. Dang it! I like filling in that little. You got 1% more crit, because I think it feels cool to say I just made my character stronger. Yes, it is boring. Yes, it is bland. I like having it. I think it's one of those things in old MMO, like old games, that is nice to see that I've made my character stronger.
But at that point, it just feels like a chore. Like, it's not even interesting. It doesn't affect your gameplay at all. Like, you may as well just get those things passively instead of having the player say, I want this. Like, you may as well just give it to the player, because it's so passive and not important to your
So here, then let me ask you this. Why do you level up then?
Because you get things. You get new things, you strongly, it changes your gameplay. You get new abilities, you get new talents, it changes the way you play the game.
Outside of the fact that there are arbitrary numbers that say, congratulations, here's your big boy gear, what does leveling up do for you?
I just told you, it gets you abilities. You get new abilities, you get new talents, which change the way you play, and that's the important part of leveling up. The classes change dramatically across their leveling. Plus, you're gated to certain, things you want to do.
I wouldn't say my class changed dramatically from 90 to 100. I wouldn't. I mean, really? No, I don't think Brewmaster changed that dramatically, to be quite honest.
Maybe not.
I don't think a lot of classes changed that. They had nice tweaks. Most of that dramatic change you had was created during an era when they did have those little 1% things.
I'll tell you why you level, because the leveling experience, the questing and cinematics was really interesting the first time through. That's why you level. And then after that, give your ults at 100, please.
It was one of the 2 redeeming points of Warlords of Draenor.
Yes. All right,
then
so we did have another question in the dojo as well, also from Tiger Crane. Do you feel like class fantasy that Blizzard is promising will clash with raid balance class role? No, I don't think so.
I don't either. No.
Yeah, I think it will allow them to focus in on that and make it even better.
I think it lets them cut some fluff away, like balance dual wield Windwalker versus two-handed. Invite same for the other 3 specs. Dual wield Frost versus two-handed Frost. They don't need to worry about balancing that out. I think in some places it'll improve. I can't say all places it'll improve because I'm sure new issues will crop up. But I think in some aspects it will cut out some unnecessary problems.
Yep.
And even if it didn't affect balance at all, I think it's just more to give the specs more identity. Like, something they released, and, obviously it's not final, but like Shadow Priest getting a new resource system called Insanity. Like, Insanity's always been a part of Shadow, I guess not always, but it's been a part of Shadow since what? Was it Mop or Kata? I can't remember, but it feels like forever. And it's a huge part of what they do now, and to discard that would be terrible. So they just made it a thing, a huge thing for Shadow Priest, and that's, it just adds to the fantasy of the class without affecting balance. It doesn't necessarily have to have anything to do with balance. It's just giving you some identity. You don't use mana like all these other, plebeian casters. They use mana. What is that? It's kind of the same thing they did with Warlocks. They gave Warlocks Burning Embers and Demonic Fury and Soul Shards. Like, that's all so different. It gives each spec just a slightly different. It's the same mechanic essentially, but if they just tweak it just a little bit, it gives it this huge change in how it feels. And I think that's the point of the class fantasies, just to give, especially like rogues and hunters, which have three, or mages that have three DPS specs. It's like, how do you make the same class play three different ways, or at least feel like it plays three different ways?
Ooh,
and that's what
they're
trying to achieve.
You put an eye patch on him and call him a pirate. There you go.
All right. If you have a question for the show, you can reach out to us via email at show@monkmeditation.com. We want to hear from you and go over what you think about the role. So if you have any thoughts about this role balance that we talked about for a long time this episode, reach out to us. Let us know your thoughts. Also, if you are recruiting a monk, so if you need a monk, we happen to know a couple of them. So you can reach out to us at show@monkmeditation.com or on Twitter at monk_meditation. Just let us know what you're looking for, what times you raid, things like that. We'll shout that out on the show. All right, guys, I think it's time to put the brew away. So please rate us on iTunes, Stitcher, subscribe on YouTube, or on twitch.tv. Your numbers do help us out. And if you would like to help support the show and help it grow and get even better, you can become our boss by going to patreon.com/monkmeditation. You can help guide the future of the show and get some fun rewards along the way. All right, Monkyo, have any shout-outs?
I'm not prepared for this.
All right, LeBlue, you got any shout-outs?
I do. Not necessarily World of Warcraft related, but friends, it is October. It is Save the Tatas month, breast cancer awareness. It's a special one to my fiance's mother, who battled twice and won twice with breast cancer.
Well done.
And to all of that in helping awareness of cancer overall, so that one day we can get rid of it. And sappy stuff.
F cancer. All right, Monkyo, any shout-outs?
Just, I guess, to my guild for, just trying to find people. Like, we're going through kind of a problem where we're losing a few people, and they're just constantly getting new people in. Just all of the officers and whoever else just being crewmen. That's awesome. Thank you.
And shout out to our patrons at patreon.com. Thank you for your support. You helped get Monkyo a better mic. Now if we can just get a better internet, that would be fantastic. All right, and a shout out to Rolling Thunder and to Kyrie, who's going to be leaving us because we can't hold on to priests apparently. So shout out to him. He's been with us for a while in a number of different roles. So thank you for your flexibility, and we'll miss you. All right, as part of the Monk community, if you have a blog, website, or person you want to see on the show, reach out to us at show@monkmeditation.com. The Monk community is the best one in the world of Warcraft. We want to showcase it. LeBlue, how can the dojo best reach us?
You can follow the show at monk_meditation. Follow Chai T at WowMonk. Follow Air at AirWalker. You can follow Monkyo at Monkyo. And you can follow myself at Kagarai_LeBlue.
Thank you all for listening. You can watch us live Monday, October 19th at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific, midnight UTC at twitch.tv/WowMonk for the Mistweaver Roundtable. So far, we are supposed to have Monkyo. We are having Misty Tea House that makes those great weak auras, and Geodude, Theory Crafter Extraordinaire. So we may have another guest host on there as well, so tune in. You can also visit monkmeditation.com for links to all the ways to watch and listen to the show. That will wrap up this episode of Monk Meditation.
May your brews be strong and your heart stronger.
Good night, everybody.
Night.
I I rolled a 20.